They tried to bury you, Chosen One, but the universe kept watering the soil, and now they're terrified of the garden you've become. Now imagine this for a moment, Chosen One. They threw rocks, not realizing you were made of flint. They whispered behind your back, thinking their words would be enough to break you, but all they did was sharpen your focus. Picture a diamond under pressure, years of weight, darkness, and grinding forces shaping it. That's you. They thought they were destroying you, but the universe was forging you into something unbreakable. This isn't a story of survival. It's a story of transformation. Here's a fact that should make you stand a little taller. Psychologists have discovered that resilience is not just an emotional trait, it's a neurological rewiring of the brain. Every time you stood back up after being knocked down, your brain literally built new pathways for strength and self-mastery. In other words, you didn't just endure, you evolved. While they mocked, while they doubted, while they plotted, you were undergoing an upgrade at the cellular level. They have no idea that their attacks were actually your training ground. And thank you, Chosen One. Don't forget to give this message strength by pressing like and subscribe, not for me, but to help this light reach more souls who need it. This is our shared responsibility to spread the truth. Thank you for being part of this mission. You are not just a listener, you are a force, a movement, a spark that lights others. Now back to why you're here. The title says it all. God's chosen ones, you passed. It's time to tell you everything. But let's stay neutral and call it what it is, the universe's test. Before you even knew you were in an exam, you were already seated in the universe's classroom. No paper, no pen, no instructions, just life itself throwing you into storms, betrayals, losses, and nights where the silence felt louder than thunder. You weren't just living, you were being measured, weighed, and refined. The hardest test is the one where the examiner stays silent until the end. Think about it. Even scientists know the average human can endure roughly 45 units of pain before breaking. But you endured betrayals that would have broken nations. You walked through fire with your sanity hanging by a thread, yet you never surrendered your soul. That's not normal endurance. That's a rare calibration. It's proof that something inside you was built to last beyond the ordinary. Sometimes it felt less like a test and more like you were the punchline in a cosmic prank show. If life were a hidden camera comedy, you were the main character, tripping over invisible wires while the audience gasped. But here's the plot twist they never expected. Every stumble was actually a step closer to your unveiling. What looked like humiliation was actually preparation. What they thought was your downfall was actually the build-up to your rise. Lean in, Chosen One. What you thought was random suffering was actually a deliberate syllabus. The universe doesn't give explanations mid-exam. It gives results at the end. And now, at this point in your journey, it's time to reveal what was really happening behind the scenes. You passed. Not barely, not by accident. You passed because you were built for this, even when you doubted yourself. This is not about pity. This is about power. This is not about simply surviving. This is about emergence. Chosen One, you survived the kind of test most people don't even know exists. You endured the kind of pain most people can't name. You became the proof that resilience is a superpower. And today, you're going to hear why and what comes next. And Chosen One, thank you for showing up right here, right now. This isn't just another video you're scrolling past. This is your mirror, your confirmation, your proof that the universe saw every test you endured and is now pulling back the curtain. Before we reveal everything, take a moment to anchor yourself in this message. Drop 777 in the comments if you're ready to claim your passing moment and step into what's next. And if you feel called, bless the team behind this with a super thanks. Your support, whether it's a cent or 1,000, keeps this truth alive and moving to the souls who need it most. This is not a show, this is a mission, and you're part of it. Now, lean in, because what comes next will connect every dot you've been carrying in silence. Let's step into it, slowly but surely. And believe me, if you're truly one of the chosen ones, you'll feel the pull to stay until the very end. Let's begin. Number 1. Dragged through fire, you still walked out untouched by their poison. They wanted to see you crawl, but instead they watched you bleed, burn, and break, yet somehow you rose without carrying their poison in your veins. Chosen one, let's make one thing clear from the very start. You weren't tested in ways people around you could ever measure or comprehend. They look at your story and think it was just bad luck, just heartbreak, just financial ruin, or just betrayal. But the truth is, you were dragged through storms designed not only to hurt you, but to corrupt you. This wasn't about whether you could handle pain. Anybody can clench their jaw, swallow their tears, and push through a season of hardship. Your test was deeper, darker, and far more dangerous. It was a test of integrity. Could you walk through fire without letting the flames stain you? Could you stand in front of lies, betrayal, envy, and humiliation without becoming bitter, twisted, or like them? That's what most people miss. They think endurance is about how much you can take before you fall, but your endurance wasn't measured in bruises or scars. It was measured in your refusal to trade your soul for survival. That's why the enemy is furious. They tried every trick: temptation, mockery, sabotage, fake friendships, false promises, hoping that somewhere along the line you'd compromise. They wanted you to quit on yourself, quit on your purpose, or worse, become like them. And yet, here you stand, bruised, yes, scarred, absolutely, but corrupted, never. That's why your survival is not just survival, it's victory. Now imagine this: a man in a desert with no water for days. His lips are cracked, his body is trembling, and vultures circle overhead. Another man passes by and offers him a drink, poison disguised as clean water. Most would drink. Most would reason that survival requires compromise. But you chose to die thirsty rather than live corrupted. That's the metaphor of your journey. They offered you poison, wrapped in opportunity, relationship shortcuts, and easy exits. But you didn't drink it. You didn't sell yourself for comfort. You stayed true even when truth looked like it was costing you everything. That is why the universe is about to reward you with what cannot be stolen. Some people might ask right now, but why did the universe test me like that? Why couldn't it just bless me without stripping everything first? The answer is simple but brutal. Gold isn't trusted until it's been through fire. Steel isn't considered strong until it's hammered, bent, and cooled 100 times over. And a diamond? It only becomes a diamond after years of crushing weight in complete darkness. Your life followed the same law. The universe wasn't trying to punish you, it was proving you. You were being measured against your destiny, not against other people. That's why nobody around you can fully understand why your storms were so heavy, because their purpose was never as big as yours. And here's the truth that will sting your enemies the most. Survival alone can make people bitter, resentful, or hollow. Look at those who came out of their own storms, twisted and full of venom. They let the fire turn them into the very monsters who once tormented them. But you, chosen one, refused to bend that way. Even when betrayal whispered that you should become cold. Even when rejection shouted that you should lower your worth. Even when loneliness clawed at you to settle for less. You said no. You held your ground. That is what makes you different. That is what makes you chosen. The test was never fair. It was never supposed to be. It wasn't designed to make sense in human terms. It was a calibration, a separation, a sifting that would distinguish those who merely exist from those who carry power that shakes atmospheres. Others broke and blamed. You bent and became. Others cursed their enemies and grew bitter. You endured and grew sharper. Others hid in their wounds. You wore yours as armor and kept walking. That's the part your enemies will never admit, that every blow they thought would end you only pushed you closer to your unveiling. And here's another fact, something scientists have found. When a person experiences trauma and chooses growth over bitterness, their brain actually rewires itself, building stronger neural connections that make them more resilient, more focused, and more capable of navigating life. That's you, chosen one. Your brain itself became a weapon forged in fire. Every sleepless night, every betrayal, every rejection rewired you into someone they cannot dismantle. They thought they were breaking you, but in reality, they were programming you to become unstoppable. But let's address the question you may still carry in your heart. Did I really pass? Because it didn't feel like winning. It felt like losing everything. That's the cruel irony of these kinds of tests. Passing rarely looks like crossing a finish line to applause. Instead, it looks like dragging yourself out of bed when your soul feels heavy. It looks like walking into rooms where you're misunderstood, but holding your head high anyway. It looks like continuing to love when you had every reason to hate. Passing doesn't feel glamorous. It feels invisible. But here's the secret. The silence of recognition on Earth only means the universe itself was taking note. You were being watched, measured, and marked, not for your flawless strength, but for your refusal to hand over your soul when it would have been the easy option. That's what made the universe lean in closer. That's what drew the line between you and everyone else. You weren't competing with them. You weren't being judged against their lives. You were being refined against your destiny. And because you passed, the next chapter doesn't belong to their insults, their sabotage, or their poison. It belongs to you. The brutal truth your enemies choke on is this. You endured what they could never survive. They couldn't last a week carrying what you carried for years. They couldn't stand the isolation, the ridicule, the silence, or the betrayal. And deep down, they know it. That's why they whisper. That's why they slander. That's why they stare with confusion, because you walked out of a fire they would have died in, and you walked out uncorrupted. Chosen one, that's what it means to pass. Not that you are untouched, but that you are untouchable. Not that you are flawless, but that you are unbroken. Not that you are pain-free, but that your pain did not own you. You are living proof that the heaviest tests produce the sharpest weapons. And you are that weapon now, polished, precise, and dangerous to the forces that once tried to consume you. And so, let it be known, they tested you beyond human measurement, but you walked out beyond human explanation. You carry a resilience that makes the universe nod in approval and makes your enemies tremble in regret. You passed, and now it's time for the world to see what comes next. Number 2. They tried to rot your soul, but you kept your light untouched. They couldn't destroy you, so they tried to infect you. They couldn't steal your crown, so they tried to stain it. Chosen One, what most people will never see is that your real battlefield was never your bank account, your job, your reputation, or even your relationships. All of that was just surface-level distraction. The real war was aimed at the core of who you are, your innocence, your softness, your light, because if they could poison that, everything else would collapse on its own. That's the part outsiders can't see. They think your story is about what you lost, but the real story is about what you refused to lose. They thought your breaking point would be your heart. They thought if they scarred it enough, you'd become like them. They were wrong. Imagine this for a moment. A well of clear, cold water hidden deep underground. People come with buckets of mud and pour it in over and over, hoping to cloud it, to make it undrinkable. But the water keeps bubbling up pure from the spring below, washing away the filth. That's you. Every betrayal, every rejection, every rumor poured mud into your life. But your spring stayed clear. Your spirit kept renewing itself from a deeper source they couldn't touch. They tried to pollute your kindness, but it kept rising fresh. That's why they're mad now, because their mud didn't work. And here's another image, a white cloth left out in the rain. Most people think stains are inevitable, but your soul was like a fabric no dye could penetrate. It absorbed pain, yes, but it never took on the color of hatred. That's not weakness. That's rare strength. It takes no effort to grow hard and bitter. It takes an extraordinary force to remain soft in a hard world. The real test was not whether you would win, but whether you would stay clean while fighting dirty attacks. This is the part people always question. Why did it feel so personal? Why did it feel like the attacks were aimed at my heart and not just my life? Because that was the goal. Destroying your possessions would never have been enough. They could take your job, your status, even your relationships. You'd rebuild those. But if they could stain your heart, twist your character, and turn you into someone bitter and vengeful, they wouldn't just win a battle. They'd erase what made you chosen in the first place. Imagine a candle burning in a pitch-black cave. Bats fly at it, claws scratch at it, winds whip around it. If the flame goes out, the cave wins. But if the flame stays lit, even small, it lights the entire cavern. Your innocence was that flame. Your kindness, your refusal to become like them, your decision to keep forgiving, to keep loving, that's what made you powerful. They wanted it snuffed out. You refused to let them. That's why you're still glowing now. Anyone can survive loss. Few can survive without losing themselves. The enemy's strategy was subtle but relentless. Every unfair treatment was an attempt to plant a seed of bitterness. Every betrayal was a trap designed to make you close your heart. Every rejection was bait to make you stop believing in goodness. Because once the soul is hardened and twisted, that damage is hard to undo. And they know this. They know a bitter person can be manipulated, a cold person can be controlled, and a hopeless person can be led anywhere. But a person who stays soft and pure, they're uncontrollable, they're unpredictable, they're dangerous to darkness. This is why the universe took note of you, because you didn't let your pain reshape you into what hurt you. You didn't let your heart calcify into stone, even when giving up on love would have been easier. You didn't let cynicism take over, even when you had every reason to close yourself off. You didn't let bitterness take root, even when it would have been justified. That restraint wasn't weakness. It was a power greater than revenge. Think of a surgeon holding a scalpel. It takes strength to cut, but it takes greater strength to hold your hand steady and not cut where you shouldn't. That's what you did with your emotions. You held your hand steady. You had the power to lash out, to retaliate, to become cruel, but you chose discipline instead. That is strength. That is mastery. That is the proof you won the unseen war. And yes, chosen one, I know you've asked yourself, did I lose my softness? Did I fail? Because I feel harder now than I used to. Let me answer that. Harder doesn't mean corrupted. It means refined. You are not the naive soul you once were. You're wiser now. But you're still kind. You're still capable of empathy. You still refuse to harm the innocent. That's the difference. You're not bitter. You're seasoned. You're not jaded. You're sharpened. The light in you is no longer fragile. It's fierce. You walked through hell and didn't come out smelling like smoke. That's why they can't understand you. This is what makes you rare. Many go through trials and survive, but they survive twisted, hardened, and unrecognizable. You survived intact. That is the victory no one can take away from you. That is why the darkness fears you now. Because it threw everything at you: rejection, humiliation, betrayal, loss, and you still refused to become what you hated. You stayed human in a world that wanted to make you a monster. That's what it means to be chosen. Imagine a forest after a wildfire, blackened trunks, ash everywhere. But in the center of it all, one tree still stands green, roots deep, leaves untouched. That's you. They burned the forest hoping to kill you, but your roots went too deep. They couldn't reach your source, and now you're not just a tree, you're a seed bank for a new forest. You're the proof that life can survive fire and come back stronger. So when people wonder how you're still kind after everything, let them wonder. When enemies whisper about how you didn't break like they hoped, let them whisper. You know the truth. The real war wasn't over your things. It was over your essence, and you won. That's why you are rare. That's why your name carries weight, even unspoken. That's why opportunities will now start moving toward you, because purity is magnetic, integrity is currency, and light, once tested, becomes a beacon. You didn't just survive, you stayed soft where it mattered. You remained open when it was easiest to close, and because of that, the universe can now trust you with more than it could before. They tried to rot your soul, but you kept your light untouched. And now, chosen one, the very thing they tried to destroy is the thing that will lift you higher. Your innocence wasn't your weakness, it was your hidden weapon, and now it's your crown. Number 3. When the universe went quiet, it was building your power in secret. They thought the silence meant you were forgotten, but in reality, it was the sound of your wings growing in the dark. Chosen one, remember those nights when the universe went mute on you? No signs, no answers, no rescue? It felt like a cruel emptiness, like you'd been locked in a room with no door. You shouted your pain into the sky and only heard the echo of your own voice. That silence didn't just sting. It made you wonder if you'd been abandoned, if you were ever truly chosen, or if you'd failed some invisible test. But what you were experiencing wasn't neglect. It was strategy. The quiet wasn't a void, it was a forge. Imagine a seed buried in soil. Above ground, nothing moves. No light, no applause. To outsiders, it looks dead. But underground, the shell is cracking, roots are forming, and a new life is taking shape. That's what was happening inside you. The silence of the universe stripped away your dependence on crumbs of reassurance. It cut off your training wheels and forced you to find balance without a hand holding you up. And here's a fact from psychology. People who learn to self-soothe during crises build stronger neural pathways for resilience and autonomy. That's exactly what the silence was doing for you. It was rewiring you to stand on your own frequency, to sense direction without obvious signs, to trust movement without constant confirmation. Yes, the questions that rose in you were part of the exam. Am I forgotten? Did I do something wrong? But the silence was asking you a deeper question. Is your trust anchored in outcomes or in your own emerging power? Anyone can believe when there's noise, proof, and applause. It takes a chosen one to believe in the hush. The universe didn't abandon you. It was upgrading you. In that quiet, something shifted. You stopped begging for signs and started walking in quiet authority. Not because you felt invincible, but because you finally understood. The presence was there, even when you couldn't see the fingerprints. That silence wasn't absence, it was preparation. And now you can move where others freeze, because you've learned how to keep going without needing constant signals. That's the power of being chosen. Number 4. They didn't just attack you. They ran experiments on your soul and lost. They treated you like a lab rat, but you turned their experiment into a funeral for their plans. Chosen one, the battles you went through weren't random thunderstorms crashing out of nowhere. They were sniper shots, planned and timed. You weren't just attacked, you were observed, dissected, and analyzed, like a specimen under a microscope. Every betrayal, every coincidental crisis, every door that slammed at the worst possible moment, none of it was chaos. It was orchestration. You were a case study to them, a living puzzle they were sure they could solve. Imagine this for a moment, a hacker sitting in a dark room, tracing every keystroke you make, learning your patterns so they can breach your system. That's what was happening to you. They studied your moods, your triggers, your habits, your friends. They noted what made you angry, what made you doubt, what made you desperate, and they launched attacks at the exact second you were weakest. That's why it felt too precise to be coincidence. Because it was. But here's what they missed. They calculated your humanity, but overlooked your hidden force. They built maps of your cracks, but didn't see the steel under the skin. They were so obsessed with charting your weaknesses that they never realized you were changing your code mid-attack. Psychology has a word for this. Anti-fragility, systems that grow stronger the more they're stressed. That's you. Every time they hit you, you adapted, evolved, and outgrew their data. Imagine a chess player who thinks they know your next move, only for you to flip the board and invent a new game. That's what you did. Every time you endured, you ruined their research. Every time you refused to fold, their strategy crumbled. You became unpredictable. They thought they were mapping your downfall. Instead, they were documenting your transformation. They tried to weaponize the people you trusted, but you built fortresses inside yourself. They tried to time their blows, but you learned to move without rhythm. They didn't just fail to break you, you broke their entire study. They were busy measuring your fragility, but what they really exposed was their blindness. You weren't a specimen, you were a storm they couldn't chart. Number 5. The collapse they cheered was the delivery room of your rebirth. They clapped when you cracked, not realizing they were applauding your initiation. Chosen one, your enemies will never understand this truth. The moment they labeled you finished was the moment you truly began. They saw your breakdown as the closing credits, but it was actually the opening scene. What they mistook for an ending was a tearing open, a birth, a violent emergence of the version of you the universe always intended. Picture a clay pot shattering on the floor. To most, it's ruined, but in the hands of a master craftsman, those shards are broken open so gold can be poured in, sealing the cracks into veins of strength. That's you. The collapse wasn't destruction, it was reconstruction. Here's the fact: psychologists call it post-traumatic growth. When people survive extreme collapse, they often emerge with new resilience, deeper wisdom, and a more unshakable sense of purpose. You didn't survive in spite of the breaking. You survived through it and came back as someone your enemies can't even recognize. Imagine a forest fire ripping through acres, reducing everything to ash. To the untrained eye, it looks like death. But biologists know those ashes enrich the soil, creating conditions for stronger, wilder growth than before. That's what happened to you. They thought the fire ended you, but it fertilized you. Your enemies only calculated human endurance. They thought once their strength runs out, it's over. What they never expected was this: the universe doesn't require your strength to finish what it started. The breakdown wasn't your failure. It was your handoff. It was the point where your willpower ended and destiny picked up the torch. And yes, you questioned yourself in the ruins. Am I done? Is this where it all ends? But the truth is, Chosen One, your breaking point was never a grave. It was a delivery room. What they thought was rubble became your foundation. What they thought was your last breath was actually your first. They will never grasp it, but that collapse was your initiation. The strength you carry now doesn't come from being unbroken. It comes from being rebuilt. That's why you're untouchable. Your breaking point was your birth point, and they'll spend the rest of their lives regretting they didn't see it. Number 6. They were allowed small wins, so the universe could humiliate their illusions of power. They danced over battles they thought they won, not realizing the war was rigged against them from the start. Chosen One, this truth stings when you're in the middle of it. Some losses were permitted. The universe didn't block every hit, didn't shield you from every humiliation, and didn't stop them from claiming their cheap little victories. They got away with stealing opportunities. They walked off smirking after dragging your name. They strutted around as if your defeat was permanent. From the outside, it looked like you were stuck on the losing side. But what the world saw as failure was never failure. It was exposure. Those staged wins only revealed just how shallow their reach really was. Imagine a boxer who celebrates after landing a jab, not realizing the fight is 12 rounds long. That was your enemy. They confused a bruise for a knockout. They saw you stumble, but mistook it for collapse. They couldn't understand that the war wasn't about trophies, jobs, or public image. It was about your essence, and that's the one thing they could never touch. Here's a fact. Researchers have found that people who suffer repeated setbacks often develop stronger long-term resilience than those who win easily. That's you. Those so-called defeats only deepened your endurance, sharpened your instincts, and stripped away the illusion that power lies in appearances. You stopped tying your worth to possessions, positions, or public approval, because those were the very things they took. And yet, stripped bare, you still stood. Think of a wildfire that devours trees but leaves behind seeds designed to sprout only in the heat of flames. That was you. They thought the fire destroyed you. Instead, it triggered your rebirth. Their victories were smoke. Your survival was stone. Every false win they celebrated only exposed their ceiling. They could reach your reputation, your possessions, even your relationships, but never your core. They may have stolen moments, but they couldn't rewrite your ending. And that's the humiliation they can't swallow. You didn't need to win every round to prove you were chosen. The fact you're still here, still uncorrupted, is the ultimate victory. They were allowed their little battles, chosen one, but the war was never theirs to win. Number 7. Your scars became signatures of victory, not the dirt they tried to rub into you. They didn't just want to cut you, they wanted the cut to fester, but instead it healed into a banner they can't tear down. Chosen one, there's a difference the world rarely talks about. Scars versus stains. Scars whisper, "I bled, but I healed." Stains hiss, "I was marked and never got clean again." That's what your enemies were really after. They didn't just want you bruised, they wanted you branded. They wanted their betrayal to stick like permanent ink, to redefine you so that every time you looked in the mirror, you'd see their damage, not your essence. Imagine a white flag dragged through mud. That was their plan for you. But instead of mud seeping into the fibers, it slid off. You still wave. You still stand. You still shine. That's what terrifies them now. Your scars are not shame. They're proof. Proof that you endured wounds deep enough to kill, yet healed clean. Here's a fact. Trauma researchers say scars, physical or emotional, are evidence of tissue that's been rebuilt stronger than before. That's you. The scar tissue of your soul is tougher, but it hasn't lost its color. You didn't let resentment root. You didn't let cynicism harden you. You're still soft where it matters, sharp where it counts. Think of a sword fresh from the forge, hammered, scorched, cooled and polished. Every mark in the steel becomes part of its beauty and strength. That's your story. The blows you took etched patterns only authenticity can leave. Others leave the battlefield with stains, bitterness, envy, self-hatred. You left with scars that testify you were tested but never defiled. Your enemies hate your scars because they expose their failure. Every healed line on you says, "You tried to poison me, but I detoxed and grew stronger." Every mark says, "I faced fire, but I stayed real." They wanted you twisted, unrecognizable, carrying their darkness. Instead, you're carrying undeniable evidence that you're rare, someone who's been through hell and came back not just alive, but clean. That authenticity frightens them because it can't be faked. Scars you carry aren't dirt, they're signatures of victory. Number 8, they built the trap for you and ended up caught in their own net. They wrote an exam with your name on it, but the ink spelled their own downfall. Chosen one, this is the part that slices deeper than any of their attacks. They failed the very test they designed for you. They strutted in like judges, convinced they could grade your worth, your strength, your future. They built traps with surgical precision, betrayals with perfect timing, pressure that would supposedly crack you open. But the moment they chose to test you, they placed themselves on trial too. Every scheme, every whisper, every calculated hit became evidence, not of your weakness, but of their corruption. Imagine a hunter digging a pit in the forest, camouflaging it with leaves, waiting for you to fall in. Only the ground shifts, and they're the ones who tumble down. That's what happened, while everyone's eyes were on you. Will they break? Will they give in? A quieter truth was unfolding. The universe was recording motives, cruelty, deceit. Your endurance became your vindication. Their behavior became their judgment. Here's a fact from behavioral science. Under stress, a person's true nature surfaces. Pressure doesn't invent character, it reveals it. By trying to crush you, they revealed themselves. They exposed their envy, their lies, their willingness to destroy another soul just to feel powerful. And in doing so, they failed the test they created. Think of a courtroom where the accuser keeps testifying until they convict themselves. That's your story. The trap they built became the mirror reflecting their own ugliness. What they intended as proof of your unworthiness became undeniable evidence of their own corruption. That's why you can walk away with peace. The victory isn't just that you survived, it's that their intentions are now written in plain sight. Your suffering became a stage where their cruelty was broadcast, and their actions became a record they can't erase. They thought they were in control of the story, but the trial was never just about testing you, it was about revealing them, and in that revelation, their failure was sealed forever. Number 9. You were forged to lead armies, not lounge in comfort. They envied your fire without realizing it was lit in furnaces they'd never survive. Chosen one, this is why your path felt merciless. You weren't built for luxury, you were built for leadership. The universe was never grooming you for an easy life. It was refining you for a role that requires depth, credibility, and a voice that cuts through noise like steel. Comfort never produces leaders, it produces spectators. You were pressed, stripped, and humbled so that when your time comes, no one can question the weight of your authority. Imagine a sword left untested, polished only for display. It looks sharp, but the first real strike shatters it. That's why you were hammered. Every loss burned away illusions. Every betrayal stripped off arrogance. Every valley carved humility into your bones. What you went through wasn't punishment, it was preparation. Here's a fact. Sociologists say true authority isn't inherited, it's conferred by others who recognize lived credibility. That's what your scars gave you. They became your credentials. They carry more weight than degrees, followers, or titles because they prove you've endured what most only theorize about. People listen to you not because you demand respect, but because your story commands it. Imagine standing before a crowd. Some leaders gesture, demand, shout. But you stand scarred, calm, unshaken. The silence alone makes people lean in because survival has given your words gravity. That's leadership, not ego, not dominance, but authenticity that cannot be faked. While others chased applause, you were being stripped so applause wouldn't corrupt you. While some fought for platforms, you were learning the pain of powerlessness so that when influence arrived, you'd never abuse it. You know what it feels like to be silenced, so your leadership will amplify others instead of crushing them. That's why you were chosen. Your voice now carries weight, not because it's loud, but because it's been tested in silence. It's heavy because it has survived what should have broken it. That credibility is unshakable, and it's the reason the universe can now trust you to lead not from comfort, but from fire. Number 10. Your isolation wasn't rejection. It was the universe locking you in a vault of secrets. They thought you were forgotten, but really you were being pulled into rooms they'll never be invited to. Chosen one, your loneliness wasn't abandonment, it was initiation. The empty rooms, the unanswered calls, the nights when silence screamed louder than words. None of that was random. You weren't exiled because you lacked worth. You were hidden because you were being trusted with secrets too heavy for the crowd. Imagine a diamond buried deep underground. For years it's unseen, surrounded by darkness, invisible to everyone. But while hidden, it hardens under pressure until it becomes something priceless. That was your loneliness. While others fed on applause, you were fed revelations in silence. While they craved validation, you were trained in invisibility, because true power isn't forged in a spotlight, it's hammered in shadows. Here's a fact. Psychologists say solitude rewires the brain, sharpening intuition, creativity, and problem-solving in ways constant noise never can. That's what happened to you. You learned how to walk without cheerleaders, how to move without permission, how to keep your steps steady even when the world looked away. That training wasn't punishment. It was the foundation of unshakable independence. Think of a soldier in a secret bunker, stripped of comfort, cut off from the outside world. He's not abandoned. He's being prepared for missions others will never qualify for. That was you. The universe wasn't ignoring you. It was conditioning you. Yes, the test was brutal. Would you mistake isolation for rejection, or would you embrace it as preparation? Many collapse under the weight of solitude, thinking silence means insignificance. But you didn't. You endured the stillness long enough to realize it was full of whispers. Those whispers reshaped how you see, how you hear, how you fight. Now, when you step forward, you don't just carry knowledge, you carry revelation. You move with codes and keys earned in silence. Your loneliness was never wasted. It was sacred training, and the secrets you hold now aren't just for you. They're weapons and keys for those who will one day look to you for guidance. Number 11. They mistook quiet endurance for fragility, not knowing you drew from a source they couldn't touch. They laughed at your silence, blind to the fact that silence is the battle cry of those who never run out of power. Chosen one, their greatest mistake was assuming what they saw on the surface told the full story. To their eyes, you looked weak. You didn't fight dirty like they expected. You didn't collapse with the drama they were waiting for. You didn't rage, or beg, or crawl. Instead, you endured with a steady calm they couldn't decode. And because their shallow eyes only register noise and spectacle, they mistook your restraint for fragility. But here's the truth. You weren't surviving on human energy at all. You were plugged into a reservoir they couldn't locate, a current running beneath the surface, invisible yet inexhaustible. That's why every attack confused them. They saw exhaustion in your face, but they missed the fire in your spirit. They saw the weight pressing on you, but not the unseen force lifting you back up. Imagine a lighthouse in the middle of a raging storm. From the outside, it looks like a small, fragile tower, waves slamming against it, winds screaming to break it apart. But the foundation buried beneath the ocean floor is what keeps it standing. That was you. They judged the surface, blind to the source. Here's a fact. Psychologists say that quiet endurance often unnerves aggressors more than retaliation because it denies them the reaction they crave. That's why your enemies grew frustrated. They hit, but you didn't shatter. They mocked, but you didn't fold. They set traps, but you walked through with a stillness that exposed their own chaos. They thought strength is always loud, aggressive, and forceful. But you revealed a deeper kind of power. The kind that doesn't need to scream to be unstoppable. Every time you forgave instead of retaliating, every time you stood instead of crumbling, every time you moved without explanation, you broadcasted a strength they didn't even believe existed. To them, you looked breakable, but in reality, you were untouchable. They were striking flesh, never realizing your source was untouchable energy that doesn't deplete. That's why their victories evaporated. And in the end, what they mocked as weakness became the clearest proof of your power. Number 12. You were summoned to show what faith looks like when it refuses to die. Anyone can believe when the sun is shining. Real faith is proven in the dark, when every candle has gone out. Chosen One, most people talk about faith like it's poetry. Easy to preach, easy to post, easy to claim. But when comfort is stripped away, when there's no safety net, no proof, and no audience applauding, that's when real faith starts. And that's where you lived. You weren't called to show casual belief. You were called to demonstrate the kind of faith that bends but never breaks. Imagine walking a tightrope stretched over an abyss with no net. That's what your journey looked like. Others watching thought you were reckless, even foolish. But every trembling step became proof. Faith isn't agreement with circumstances. Faith is walking as though the ground exists, even when it hasn't appeared yet. Here's a fact. Psychologists have found that humans are wired to demand certainty. Our brains panic without guarantees. That's why what you carried was rare. You chose trust when nothing was certain. You refused to let fear define your decisions. You believed when belief made no sense. This wasn't blind optimism, it was radical endurance. Faith for you wasn't clean or glamorous. It was nights of tears on the pillow, prayers that echoed back like silence, knees shaking but refusing to buckle. You kept moving forward when quitting would have been logical. That refusal was your proof. Your enemies mistook it for delusion. They couldn't grasp that faith isn't about conditions, it's about conviction. You weren't waiting for evidence. You were the evidence. Every time you refused to collapse, every time you trusted through chaos, you became living proof that unbreakable faith exists. Think of a tree standing alone on a cliff, battered by wind, branches stripped, roots exposed, yet somehow it holds. That was you. To others, irrational. To the universe, unshakable. What others mocked as nonsense became the very thing that set you apart. You didn't just talk about faith, you lived it until it became undeniable. And now, Chosen One, your story doesn't just inspire, it proves. It proves faith is only real when tested, and yours was tested to the limit and refused to die. Number 13. The final question wasn't if you'd survive, it was if you'd still choose to love. Survival makes you strong. But choosing to love after survival makes you unstoppable. Chosen One, storms test your endurance. Betrayal tests your trust. Loss tests your resilience. But the real test, the one most people fail, is whether you'd still love after it all. That was the deepest exam written into your story. Not could you crawl out alive, but could you come out without your heart turning to stone? Pain has a way of mutating people. Betrayal can poison compassion. Humiliation often turns tenderness into armor. Many make it through trials with their bodies intact, but their hearts calcify. They survive, yes, but they come out bitter, suspicious, revenge-hungry, unable to care without bleeding on others. That's the hidden danger of suffering. Not the wound itself, but what it can twist you into if you let it. But you didn't. Imagine walking through a burning house and emerging with fire scars, but still carrying water in your hands. That's what you did. You refused to let cruelty erase your capacity for compassion. You refused to let rejection chain you in distrust. You refused to let darkness rewrite your character in its image. That's what makes you rare. Here's a fact. Neurologists say prolonged pain rewires the brain toward defensiveness and numbness. Most people never return to softness, but you did. That's why your endurance means more than toughness. It means your humanity is intact. Strength without love is hollow. Power without compassion is dangerous. Wisdom without empathy is worthless. You passed because your heart stayed alive. Think of steel tempered in fire. It bends, it glows, it cracks, but it emerges sharper than before. That's your heart, still soft, but now indestructible. The fact that love survived inside you is the miracle. The victory isn't only that you endured, but that you endured without losing yourself. The enemy wanted stains of bitterness. Instead, you carry scars that shine with authenticity. And that's the paradox they'll never understand. The greatest proof of strength is not how hard you can hit back, but how deeply you can still love after everything tried to destroy you. Number 14. You didn't just pass the exam, you became the proof they can't deny. Survivors tell stories. Chosen ones are the story. Chosen one, this was never about barely making it through. Anyone can crawl out of a battlefield wounded and whisper, "I survived." But you walked out as living evidence. You didn't just pass, you became the answer. When people look at you, they don't just hear about resilience, they see it with their own eyes. You're not holding a testimony, you are the testimony. Imagine a torch carried through a storm. The rain lashes, the winds scream, and everyone expects the flame to die. But when the storm passes, the torch still burns. Brighter, fiercer, undeniable. That's you. Your very presence tells the truth. Yes, the fire is real. Yes, it burns. But no, it cannot consume you. Here's a fact. Studies show people in despair respond more to lived proof than abstract encouragement. That's why your scars carry more weight than any polished speech ever could. You became the walking answer to questions whispered in the dark. Can a soul go through this much and still stand? Your life declares yes. This is why you carry authority in every room you enter, not because of charisma or eloquence, but because endurance radiates from you. People wrestling with hopelessness don't need theories, they need proof. And when they meet you, they meet proof. The irony is, your enemies thought your suffering would silence you. Instead, it amplified you. What they meant to bury you with became the very platform that elevates you. You don't just speak about forgiveness, you embody it. You don't just teach endurance, you wear it. You don't just believe in light, you shine it. That's why the universe trusted you with this path. Your scars are not just personal victories, they are keys unlocking hope in others. You became more than a survivor. You became revelation in human form. So embrace this truth, chosen one. You are not just living through trials, you are living proof that the unbreakable exists. What was meant to ruin you has crowned you. You are the answer, the evidence, the undeniable reminder that chosen ones don't just survive, they redefine what victory looks like. So, Chosen One, your journey proves the impossible can be endured, survived, and transformed into power. You are no longer just carrying a story, you are the story. Every scar, every silent night, every storm you pass through has crowned you with undeniable strength. And this message is only the beginning. If this spoke to your spirit, press the like button if you haven't already, and if you're still not part of our family, make sure to hit subscribe. Together we spread the light wider, stronger, and louder. Until next time, stand tall, stay chosen, and never forget who you are.